All right, y'all, what's up? Let's go. All right, so at the sentencing hearing, um, Puffy was convicted of 2 counts of 18 USC 2421, transportation across state lines to engage in prostitution. That was his conviction. Now, the 2 women involved were his girlfriends. Cassie was with him for 11 years. Was his girlfriend, 1000%. Jane Doe, that's what she do. This is her occupation. She sells kitty cat for her occupation. But they were affiliated with each other for 3 years. Jane Doe moved to LA to be closer to Puff. She lived within a half an hour of his house, and he still would only see her like once every 6 weeks just to hit it, because that was the understanding that they had. Because he told her from the door. When she told him, and she testified, Jane testified on the stand, that she was head over heels in love with Puff. And she told him that. And he immediately told her, said, nah, baby, I'm not your boyfriend. We are not together. I'm single. You know, I have a lot of women. You just one of them. And she testified on the stand that Puffy told her that to her face. And she said on the stand that I didn't care. I was going to deal with it. And that's what she did. In Judge Subramanian's sentencing soliloquy, his little speech that he gave, he mentioned the word force 2 times and the word coercion 4 times. Violence, I don't know how many times. He references the video from the Intercontinental Hotel, which had nothing to do with the Mann Act conviction. Now, I want to read Puffy got up and spoke too. I'm not going to read the whole thing. He pretty much thanked everybody for everything. But check this part out, Puff. This is very important. I got my coffee. It ain't got no steam, but it's still better than yours. This is Puff. I want to say thank you to the jury and Your Honor. Your Honor gave me the confidence to believe in the jury and to believe that I didn't have to testify. And the jury came and they sacrificed their time, 8 weeks in the summer. Sacrificed time with their children, and they weighed the evidence. And I thank them for their not guilty verdicts. That's Puff. Now, Judge Subramanian starts off his little speech by citing 3553A, which says that he's supposed to consider all of the behavior and characteristics of the defendant. And then 3661, there's no limitation placed on the background and character and conduct of the person convicted. Judge Subramanian. So at the outset, I just want to make clear that Mr. Combs, you are being sentenced for the offenses of conviction. The Mann Act charges here, and not the 1591 sex trafficking and not the RICO charge that you were acquitted of. That's a lie. He's saying that. However, the statute that the court is required to follow when sentencing any defendant, 18 USC section 3553, requires the court, it says, the court shall consider the nature and circumstances of the offense and the history and characteristics of the defendant. And that's what the court is required to do. And as the court previously noted in section 18 USC 3661, Congress further made clear that no limitation should be placed on the information concerning the background, character, and conduct of a person convicted of an offense which a court of the United States may receive and consider the purpose of imposing an appropriate sentence. But see, Jason Driscoll also got up and said under 18 USC 3553 section A6 that you can't impose a sentence where there's big disparities between other sentences of the same offense. But Judge Subramanian ignored that. Judge Subramanian, page 142. The sentencing hearing is a 156-page document. You can get it online at FACETIME. Dated October the 3rd, 2025. The court has to consider all of your history here, and with respect to the freak-offs and hotel nights and your relationships with Miss Ventura and Jane, the court rejects the defense's attempt to characterize what happened here as merely intimate, consensual experiences or just a sex, drugs, and rock and roll story. So he is going against what the actual male escorts who have testified on the stand, Sheree Hayes, what's the other nigga's name? Daniel Phillips. All of them, both of them, who the government trusted to come testify, said that it was always consensual. They never saw Cassie feel forced. Clayton Howard, another male escort who had a relationship with Cassie for over 8 years, got her pregnant. She gave him an STD. This is all according to Clayton Howard. She never felt forced. She would call him and request him. Rico Bozant wrote a letter to the judge that he never saw Jane Doe feel coerced or forced, that it was always consensual. Cabral, Antoine, Paul, all of these male escorts that Jane Doe was involved with, none of them ever said that it was not consensual. But this is what Judge Subramanian said at the sentencing hearing. The defense's argument that all of this was unrelated to the offense conduct in this case doesn't hold up. The evidence of the abuse in connection with the freak-offs and hotel nights is massive. That has nothing to do with the Mann Act. The prostitutes in the Mann Act are the male escorts. He doesn't mention the male escorts not once. Judge Subramanian does not mention the male escorts not once in his sentencing speech to Puff, where he gives him 50 months to a first offender with no criminal history, gets an upward variance, as he called it, an upward departure of 13 levels. Judge Subramanian, the whole trial, what I saw, he was intimidated by Maureen Comey. Judge Subramanian was intimidated by Maureen Comey. Maureen Comey, out of all the attorneys, even the assistant U.S. attorneys from the Southern District of New York, and definitely all of Puffy's attorneys, always addressed Judge Subramanian with respect, proper courtroom decorum. Maureen Comey did too, but there were times where she would be real out of line with her tone towards Judge Subramanian, talking like at him instead of to him or with him, and he took it. She went crazy after the verdict and started screaming in the courtroom at Judge Subramanian because Mark Agnifilo and them wanted Puffy to go home that day. And Judge Subramanian was going to let him go home until Maureen Comey got up and basically was acting a fool in the courtroom, screaming, hollering. She did it another time too. I want to say maybe, was it juror number 6? I think she was talking crazy then, because her, Jason Driscoll, and Alexander Shapiro were going back and forth with Judge Subramanian about why juror number 6 should or should not be removed. And she was jumping up, just like showing like no respect to the judge in terms of not showing, let me say this. She didn't show as much respect to the judge as everybody else did. And then there was some times where she just blatantly stood up and acted like a spoiled, privileged white girl with a powerful father. She did that often. Another time was when, and the reason I can say that is because I grew up in an all-white town in the 70s and 80s, and I went to school with a lot of privileged, rich, entitled white kids, and I saw how they acted. That's why I can say that. I got experience with that. Another time was when Brian Steele was cross-examining Mia. She came back, Maureen Comey came back in the court because Brian Steele broke Mia down. Had her lying, crying on the stand, exposing her. She came back in the courtroom and was yelling at Judge Subramanian, oh, he's harassing the witness. We take offense to that. Just being real disrespectful with it. And Judge Subramanian told us, no, I don't see that. I don't see him harassing the witness or badgering the witness. But Judge Subramanian was intimidated by Maureen Comey, man, in that trial. Ask people who went to the trial. Ask people who went and see what they say. Let's get back to this. There were serious offenses that irreparably harmed 2 women. Physical harm, emotional harm, and again, psychological harm. This is page 143. The effects of which continue to this day. You plied Miss Ventura and Jane to drugs, forcing Cassie to opioid addiction. This is such a lie. Cassie stated on the stand that she was already getting high before she met Puff. Puff did not force her into opioid addiction. The word force. Later on down the line, but the coercion was the same, if not worse. So we got force and coercion on page 143. You had another hotel night where you brutally assaulted Jane. That was self-defense. Jane and Puffy had one fight. And she testified, Jane, on the stand under the fake name, because she fake, that she took Puffy's head first and slammed it into the kitchen counter, provoked him to whoop her ass. It was self-defense. Now, another thing, and then this is what he says, Jane creditably testified to those things. How could she give credible testimony and she's testifying under a fake name? Get your dumb ass out of here. Jane has one fight with Puff, and it's only after she starts meeting with the federal agents and they tell her that Puffy is under investigation. This is after the Cassie lawsuit. And the feds tell her, I believe, because the same thing happened to me in my case, they encouraged her to start a fight with him. Or she became emboldened by speaking with them and knowing that he was getting ready to get wrapped up in a criminal federal case. I remember in my case, the same thing happened after Little Sean's mother, she was my secretary. After the feds came and did their thing, her whole attitude shifted toward me. And she started physical altercations with me that never took place prior to that. And I knew it was, the same thing happened to me, man. I ended up getting locked up in Hudson County Jail in Kearney, right there on 1 and 9. I was living in Jersey City at the time. And the Jane did the same thing. She started the fight with Puff. But yet, this is what he uses, Judge Subramanian, at Puffy's sentencing. Check out Judge Subramanian. According to her, according to Jane, you said the following. According to Jane, somebody who's testifying under a fake name, you're going to use what they say as truth. Take this fucking pill. You're not going to ruin my fucking night. You better go out there. You're not going to ruin my fucking night. Get out there, suck his dick, fuck him. I don't care. Just you're not going to ruin my fucking night. You asked Jane mockingly, is this coercion? This is such a lie. This is page 144. This is such a lie. So the word is used, coercion, again. A substantial sentence must be given to send a message to abusers and victims alike that exploitation and violence against women is met with real accountability. Page 146. The profound impact on Miss Ventura and Jane, the time span over a decade, Jane was only 3 years, during which these acts of prostitution occurred. The fact that these offenses occurred with intimate partners, the evidence of physical violence, and the coercion, second time coercion. Bottom of page 147. The severity of the conduct at issue, the violence, the drugs, the coercion. Coercion again. Bottom of page 147. Coercion. This is an upward variance from the guidelines, but is warranted given the guideline does not adequately reflect the severity of the defendant's conduct, nor the defendant's immense resources which enabled his crimes. This is page 151. An upward variance. A first offender on a Mann Act got an upward departure of 13 levels. Unheard of. And got sentenced to 50 months. Unheard of. Page 153. With Miss Ventura and Jane, you've been through abuse and trauma that most of us can't imagine. As Cassie says, the defense's narrative that her relationship with Mr. Combs was a great modern love story is false. These are her words. These were not her words. These were the words of her crooked lawyer, Doug Wigdor, of the Wigdor Law Firm, who filed a civil case in federal court full of perjury and extorted $20 million from Puff. This is on page 153. Nothing about this story is great, modern or loving. This was a horrific decade of my life sustained by abuse, violence, forced sex, and degradation. Forced again. And I got Wigdor wrote that. Why didn't Cassie, if Cassie and Jane really had some serious beef with Puff and really had an axe to grind with Puff and really wanted just, vindication and revenge, they both would have came to the sentencing and spoke. They didn't come because the prosecutors called them and said, yo, come and testify for us at the sentencing. They said, man, we're not coming down there. No. And they didn't come. Page 154. Turning to Mr. Combs, I know you feel like you're in a dark place right now, but these crimes were serious ones, and your violence, coercion, and abuse have had a devastating consequences for the women involved, women who loved and depended on you. Coercion again. This is the fourth time. Coercion. This is Wigdor, wrote some other stuff. All the letters that they said came from Cassie, those were from her lawyer, Doug Wigdor. Cassie didn't write them letters. That's my opinion. So, Judge Subramanian, a United States District Judge who was intimidated by the lead prosecutor throughout the whole trial, who is only 2 years on the bench. The first South Asian judge in the Southern District of New York gave a first offender on a punk-ass Mann Act charge a 13-level enhancement and referenced coercion 4 times and force 2 times, drugs multiple times, and all of these offenses, drugs, coercion, and force, were predicate offenses under the racketeering conspiracy, the RICO charge that Puffy had, that the jury said he was not guilty for, that he was acquitted for. So this would be considered, quote unquote, acquitted conduct. Shit that he was charged for, but the jury said no. So 17 federal judges have come out and said that using acquitted conduct in sentencing is unjust and unconstitutional. Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice Barrett, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, Supreme Court Justice Scalia, on the United States Supreme Court, have all said, knock it off with the acquitted conduct sentencing. Yet, this motherfucker, Judge Subramanian, does precisely that. Puffy got over-sentenced, overcharged, targeted prosecution. The prosecutors cheated every day. Lawyers in New York with licenses under the New York bar filed federal civil complaints against him full of perjury. These same lawyers wrote letters on behalf of their clients that their clients didn't write, saying that their clients wrote them. And a judge with only 2 years experience on the bench was assigned to the case. And Puffy still won. He still beat the feds at trial. I'm proud of Puff. Proud of Puff. King of New York. King of hip hop. Hands down. The comeback has already started. This case is historic. This case will go down in history as the most high profile case in New York City history to this date. The highest profile federal case in New York City history. That a black man, a nigga, the foundational black American black man, took the feds to trial in New York City and beat them. They had 6 prosecutors, with 2 of them in the back, in the cut, in the weeds. 8. Puffy hired 11 lawyers. Let's go to trial. I ain't taking no plea. Let's go. They offered him a plea of 30 years at the age of 55. He said, nah. Get you 12 of them. Let's get 12. And they got 12 jurors. During the voir dire process, or the voir dire, whatever you want to call it, the Southern District of New York used 7 of their 9 peremptory strikes on black jurors. A peremptory strike or a peremptory challenge is they bring in about 300 potential jurors and they ask these jurors questions, are you familiar with Sean Combs? Have you ever been a victim of domestic violence? Has anybody in your family ever been a victim of domestic violence? They try to see if you're biased, if you can be, because what they want are impartial jurors, right? So that they can get an impartial verdict. Like the juror is not already pro-government or pro-Puff. And this process is called the voir dire. This is done before the trial. I went one day. And in this process, you get to get 9 peremptory strikes, meaning you get to strike a juror your own call with no challenge for a reason you don't have to say. After you're done with your 9 peremptory strikes, and then you don't want a potential juror to be on the jury, you have to give a reason why. Oh, well, this juror was a fan of Biggie, and he may be swayed more toward Puff because Puff and Biggie were together. So, and it's justifiable. Okay, this juror is excused. Get him out of here. But a peremptory strike, you don't have to say what reason. And the government, the United States government, the Central Southern District of New York, used 82% of theirs, 7 of 9, to strike black jurors. And they still lost. Judge Subramanian was intimidated by Maureen Comey. Maureen Comey bullied that man in the courtroom. She talked to him crazy. No other lawyer in that courtroom talked to that man with such contempt and disdain and disrespect like Maureen Comey. But she ended up getting fired at the end of the thing. I think her father's now indicted. Her and Trump, him and Trump got some issues going on. Yep, so that's what happened. Peace.